Alright everybody, welcome to the Reteach video. I'm just going to go over each answer of the quiz and so that you can see the mistakes that you made. So please make sure to make quiz corrections. No quiz corrections, no retake. Alright, here we go. First one, you had 55.9% increase. So that means our equation was going to be A times 1 plus something to the x. So first step is to move your decimal point over 2 spaces to the left so that our decimal is 0.559. So first thing you should do is go and see which choices don't have 0.559 and cross those out. So I knew that my equation had to be 1 plus something, so part B also didn't work. So your choice should have been A, and that choice was 2 points. Okay, the next one talked about the number of students dropping, so that was an 11.9% decrease. So decrease is A times 1 minus something to the x. So first step, move your decimal point over 2 spaces. And that gives you 0.119. So look at your choices to see who is not 0.119. And again, C and D don't work. So because the equation is supposed to be 1 minus, we look here and the only choice that has 1 minus is B. So B was your choice. Now, when we get down to the bottom, you really have to read the question to pay attention to if you have an increase or decrease. You inherited a family heirloom painting worth $500,000 in 2015. The value of the painting increased, so that's your key word, increased, by 3.5% each year. So because there's an increase, I know my equation is going to be y equals A, that's my starting value, times 1 plus something to the x. That something is your percent as a decimal. So the first thing you should have done was take that 3.5 and move it over 2 spaces to the left. Now when we have that empty space, that's a 0. So the decimal is 0.035. So when you write your equation, you follow this model. Y equals, every equation should have a y equals or f of x equals. Because if it doesn't have it, it's not an equation, it's an expression. And they did ask for a function. All functions have to have a y equals or f of x equals. So then I'm going to put in my 500,000. And I know I'm supposed to have 1 plus something, and that something is my percent as a decimal, and then to the x. This was worth 3 points. Y equals was 1 point, 500,000 was 1 point, and this whole thing was 1 point. Okay. Now they said, what's the approximate value of the painting in 2033? So first thing you were supposed to do was put it into your y equals, and then you go to your table and go to 0 because 0 should have 500,000 if you did it right, which it does. So then you could count. The first year was 2015, so you can go 2015, 2016, 2017, and just keep counting. Or you could just subtract 2033 minus 2015, and that gives you 18 years. So that 18 is what you're supposed to be looking for in this table. So when we go down to 18, we find out that this painting is worth $928,000 $745. Now I didn't mark off if you didn't have the comma, but please make sure that that was your answer. And remember, as you're watching this video, feel free to stop and rewind so that you can understand what's going on. Second thing said the number of coyotes in the wild in the northern section of Allegheny County is decreasing. So once you see decreasing, circle it, circle your rate, and that tells you that your equation should be y equals a times 1 minus something to the x. So by the time you're done, you're going to have your starting value and then 1 minus. You have to change that 2.45% to a decimal. So move it over 2 spaces to the left. Put a 0 in the open space. So 2.45% becomes 0.0245 as a decimal. That's going to go here. What goes here is the starting number of coyotes, which was 120. So our equation is 120 times 1 minus 0.0245 to the x. So now what we're going to do is go to our y equals, just like we did with the last problem, and put this into your calculator. And this question is different because it asks, when will the number of coyotes drop below 50? So we want a number that's smaller than 50. So as I go down my table, and remember we're looking on this side. As I go down my table, I get 50.366 coyotes. That's exactly 50. It's not below. So we got to go to the first number that's below. So 49 is the first number that's below 50 coyotes. So that would be after 36 years. So for those of you who wrote 35 years as your answer, you didn't pay attention to the words below 50 coyotes. All right, so that takes care of the first page. Now let's go to the back. So I'm going to show you how to do it in both calculators, whether you have the black or if you have the big calculators. So first thing you're going to do is you do your stat edit. And let's see. Then I'm going to put it in this calculator, just so that you could see the difference. So when you're putting this in your calculator, you got to do stat calc 0. And then you're going to see L1, L2. That means that they're taking the information from L1 and L2 of your table. And then we also want information into our y equals. So you go down to the store, and that's when you press vars. Take the arrow to y vars 1, 1. And when you do that, you'll see y1 there. That tells you that the whole equation will be in your y equals when we're done. Now here we're going to do stat calc, the same thing, 0. And we're going to go, so there's no store, so we're just going to go to vars, y vars 1, 1. So this one would say the regression with y1. This one says regression at the top with y1 being stored, so it's a little different. So with this one, you just press enter until you see the equation. And here you just press enter once and you see the equation. Now people are giving me a lot of grief about this, but in bright bold letters it says 3 decimal places. So you got to have 3 numbers after your decimal. You have to pay attention to that. So we have 1, 2, 3. I should have 950 after the 208. Now, for those of you who put 95, that's fine, and I only allow that because that's a 0. But for those of you who missed the y equals, that's a big problem. And then the next thing was that it was 094. I rounded it up to 095. Some people kept it as 094, and I accepted that answer. But this is how it was supposed to be written. Now, if you go to your y equals in both of your calculators, you'll see that the equation is already in there and you don't have to put it in yourself. So now when they say predict how many houses in 2017, if you look here, the starting year is 2007. So if I press second graph and I go up to 0, I should have 208.950, which was this number right there. Okay, black calculator is having an issue. Okay, so here's your 208.95, and then it says how many houses will be at Northwest Apartments in 2017. So just subtract, because that's the starting year. And you'll find out that it's 10 years later, so we just have to go down to 10. And you'll notice that it says 517.48. We can't have pieces of houses. Like, who's selling a piece of a house? So you have to say 517 houses. No decimal. Okay, it doesn't make sense to have a piece of a house. And then it says, according to this model, determine the year the number of apartments exceeds 1,200. Exceeds means more than 1,200. So we have to just keep going down until we find the first number that's bigger than 1,200. And the first number that came out to be more than 1,200 was 1,281. Excuse me. And that's 20 years later. So that is x equals 20, but that's not the answer to the question. They said the year. So if we started in 2007 and it's 20 years later, you gotta do 2007 plus 20. And that would give you, 2027. So if you put 20 as your answer, I gave you 1 point, but the actual answer, because they wanted the year, was 2027. And then what is the rate of increase of houses in Northwest Apartments? You had to do B minus 1 times 100. So B, that's your B value up here. So you were supposed to do 1.095 or 094 minus 1 times 100. So that's 0.095 times 100, or you could have moved it over 2 spaces, it doesn't matter. But the answer was 9.5% increase. You have to write the word increase. So the points for this question was 3 points, so it's 1 point for your work, 1 point for 9.5%, and 1 point for increase. If you forgot the percent, I had to take off points because they asked what was the rate, and rate is a percent. All right, last question. So you're going to go to your stat edit and clear out whatever was in there. And we're only going to put in the first 2 pieces of information. So that's all you're going to put into your calculator. Now with this question, again, you have to do your stat, calc, 0, go to the store, vars, y vars 1, 1. You'll know you did it right if you see y1 there. And then calculate. Same thing here. Stat calc 0 vars y vars 1, 1, and you'll see the same equation. So they're telling you what to write. They're telling you to write a b to the x. So for this question, you could write that in first. So it'll be y equals 75 times 0.995 to the x. You should have no 1 plus or 1 minus in here. You should not have that. So if you look here, I did 995 because that fourth number. If you guys put 994, that's okay. I didn't take off points. But there were 3 points for this question. One for the y equals, one for the 75, and one for the 0.995. If you put this in, it was wrong. You only need to do that when they give you the percent here and you don't have enough information for a table. But if the calculator gives you the equation, use what the calculator gave you. Now the last part I know was controversial for some of you, but you go to your second graph and remember the question asks the price of the gift card each year. So most of you were putting all 3 decimals. Why would you do that? You should only be putting 2 because we're talking about money. You didn't see 3 decimals here. So it should be 2 decimals. It doesn't have to tell you that there's 2 decimals. You should just know that because it's money. And money is always 2 decimal points. Oops, I made a boo-boo. So it's 73.49 and then 73.12. So where did I get these numbers from? Right here. Okay, I just dropped the last number and I rounded up in 2 cases, but even if you didn't round up, it was okay. So there's your reteach video. I basically went through everything. Rewind, watch it again. I know it's 17 minutes long, but it's there to help you. All right, good luck.